All right, so have you ever wondered if, like, something as small as tipping habits could actually say something deeper about a couple's values and, how compatible they are?
Yeah, it is interesting, isn't it?
Today, we're diving deep into this video that follows some real couples and, like, how they handle tipping etiquette, which can be a little awkward sometimes.
Yeah, it can be awkward.
Sometimes.
Tipping, it seems like such a small thing on the surface, but it can often be connected to some pretty deeply held
Oh,
beliefs
yeah, for sure.
about, work and the value we put on certain types of jobs
What?
and how we treat people who provide services to us.
Absolutely. And, the first story we're going to look at it really highlights that point.
Okay, cool.
It's a couple, and one of them actually thinks tipping is totally optional,
Oh, wow.
like completely optional.
You might be surprised by that, but that's actually not an uncommon viewpoint.
Really?
Yeah, it could because of how they were raised, or maybe they just don't understand how the service industry really works. The ins and outs of it all.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Yeah.
And in this case, that was it.
What was it? How they were raised, or?
Yeah, they just weren't aware
Oh, they weren't aware.
of how it all worked.
Okay.
And the partner who wasn't a tipper, they had a real eye-opening experience when the other one explained how a lot of servers and bartenders make, way less than minimum wage.
Right.
And they have to rely a lot on tips to, just make ends meet.
Yeah, to get by. Yeah.
It totally changed their perspective.
It's amazing how just one conversation like that
Right.
can totally change somebody's mind about something.
Yeah.
And, tipping, it goes beyond just the actual money.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing someone's hard work and effort, even
Oh,
if it's a service that we don't think much about.
totally. And the coolest thing is that this new awareness, it transformed this person's behavior.
Oh, wow.
From then on, they always tipped generously.
That's great.
Well, almost always.
Oh, almost always.
There's a twist to the story.
There is.
So picture this. They're at a restaurant, and the waitress, she's not exactly the best example of great service.
Got it.
She's on her phone, basically ignoring them the whole meal. And even though this partner had become, a consistent tipper, they actually tipped less this time.
Because of the bad service?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
That's really interesting. Does fairness always have to be unconditional?
That's a good question.
No?
Yeah.
Is there ever a time when someone's behavior makes you think, do they even deserve the standard tip?
Great.
Even if you believe in tipping well,
Yeah.
it adds another layer to the whole tipping thing.
Yeah, for sure.
It's complicated.
The author of this video, she even says that, tipping norms are important, but how things actually go down in the moment,
Uh-huh.
it can really affect what you decide to do.
Yeah, context matters.
So it's not always as clear-cut as, always tip a certain amount no matter what happens.
Right, right.
It's more nuanced than that.
Yeah. That's interesting how it's not just black and white.
Right.
I think that says a lot about how we all view fairness and accountability.
Uh-huh.
So in this situation, it seems like this person values both.
Right.
They get how important tipping is, and they show that by how they usually tip,
Yeah.
but they're not afraid to change things up based on what's happening.
Yeah.
They're using their own sense of fairness in each situation instead
Yeah.
of just always following a rule.
Right.
It's not just blindly following rules.
I like that.
Yeah.
That's a good way to put it.
It's nuanced. It's interesting.
Okay, ready for the next couple story?
Yeah, hit me.
This one goes even deeper into, those tough tipping disagreements.
Okay.
And there's some serious tension between this husband and wife.
Uh-oh.
The wife is, not happy about her husband's cheap tipping, and you can imagine all the arguments that causes.
Oh, yeah, I can imagine.
It's like every time they eat out, there's this tension hanging over them about the bill.
Totally. It makes sense that that would cause friction. It goes beyond the money itself. It's a core difference in their values.
Yeah.
For the wife, it sounds like tipping is almost like a moral thing,
Mm-hmm.
a way to be fair to the people working hard in the service industry.
Right?
But her husband, maybe he sees it as optional or even unnecessary,
Uh-huh.
and that creates a conflict that can be really hard to fix.
And wait till you hear the author of the video. She shares her own story,
Oh, wow.
and it's so relatable.
Okay.
Her ex-husband, he was a notoriously bad tipper.
Oh, no.
And to avoid being embarrassed and to make sure the server was treated fairly, She would secretly leave extra cash on the table. I
Wow.
was floored when I heard that.
That's amazing. She took things into her own
Oh,
hands.
no.
It shows you how much empathy she has for the people in the service industry, don't you think?
Oh, yeah.
She's going above and beyond to fix what she sees as unfair.
Uh-huh.
And I'm sure the servers really appreciate it.
For sure.
But it makes you wonder how often this happens.
Yeah, how many other people are out there doing the same thing?
Right. Are there tons of people secretly adding to tips just so they don't get judged or feel guilty?
Right. It's like a secret club of tip-top uppers making the world a little bit fairer $1 at a time.
Maybe we should start a support group.
Yeah.
But really, this just shows you the lengths people will go to when their own values clash with their partners,
Yeah.
especially in social situations where they feel like they need to fit in or avoid making a scene.
Totally. All right, buckle up because this next story throws a wrench in things.
Okay.
We meet this coffee shop manager, and he's so fed up with customers leaving religious pamphlets instead of tips
Oh, wow.
that he decides to add a mandatory tip to every bill.
Really?
That's a bold move.
It is a bold.
You can tell he's really frustrated by what he sees as disrespect toward his employees
Yeah.
and, not valuing their hard work.
Uh-huh.
It shows the struggles a lot of servers and baristas go through, money-wise,
Yeah.
especially in places where tips are like built into what they're expected to earn.
Right.
But it also makes you ask, does a manager have the right to force a tip like that, even if he means well?
Yeah.
Where's the line between taking care of employees and telling customers how they have to tip?
It's a good question.
It's a debate that's way bigger than just how much each person decides to tip.
Yeah. It is.
What do you think about what this manager did?
It's tough.
Yeah.
Was it okay, or did he go too far?
Yeah.
It's really complex, and I bet people will have strong feelings on both sides. You can understand why he's frustrated and wants to protect his employees.
Yeah.
But is it fair to make customers pay a tip, even if it's for a good reason?
Right.
It makes you think about the ethics of mandatory tipping policies.
It does. And, it's making me question my own ideas about tipping in general.
Okay, how so?
Like, is it always supposed to be a voluntary, nice thing to do?
Right.
Or is there a point where it becomes more like you have to do it?
Okay.
Like a way to be part of a system that's
Mhm.
supposed to make sure people who work really hard for little pay get paid fairly. It's given me a lot to think about.
Yeah, lots to ponder.
You've brought up some great points.
And these questions actually lead us perfectly into our next segment,
All right, cool.
where we'll hear what the experts have to say about these stories and what they reveal about our values,
Uh-huh.
our relationships, and just how complicated the service industry can be.
I'm hooked. Can't
Awesome.
wait to hear more about those expert insights.
Yeah, it'll be interesting.
Can't wait.
Me too. It's amazing to me how tipping can almost be like a magnifying glass,
Oh, yeah.
It helps you see your own values and the values of the people around you,
Right.
especially when it comes to service work and how okay you are with dealing with financial differences.
Mm-hmm.
It shows how we deal with potential conflicts in our relationships too.
That's so true. It's crazy how something as simple as tipping can bring up such deep conversations
It is.
about fairness and responsibility.
Totally.
And, even the dynamics between couples
Yeah.
who knew tipping could be so profound.
I know, right? It can be. As we've been talking about all these different scenarios,
Yeah.
it makes me think about the differences between generations when it comes to tipping.
Okay.
Older generations might see things differently.
Right.
Maybe they think of it as something extra you do for great service,
Okay.
not like a core part of a worker's pay.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But these days, it's really important for those workers to make a living,
Right.
especially when their wages don't match how hard their jobs are.
So you're saying different generations basically grew up with different ideas about tipping.
Exactly.
Yep.
Think about it. Older generations, maybe they were raised when tipping really was extra,
Oh.
like a reward for going above and beyond.
Yeah.
But now with everything costing more and how wages work in a lot of service jobs,
Right.
tipping's become way more crucial.
It has.
And I think younger generations like millennials and Gen Z,
Okay.
they're more aware of all that.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
It makes me wonder if social media plays a role too.
Oh, and
We see so many stories online about the problems people in the service industry face.
that's true.
Maybe younger people are more sensitive to those issues and feel more obligated to tip well,
Yeah, you could be right there. Social media definitely makes these conversations louder and brings more attention to wage gaps
Mm-hmm.
and how important fair tipping is.
Right.
It's almost like there's this pressure to be seen as a good tipper online.
That's a good point.
Makes you wonder, are we tipping because we genuinely want to or because we don't want to be judged on social media?
Wow.
It's something to think about for sure.
You've brought up some really interesting points.
I try.
But let's change gears a little.
Okay.
We've seen how things can go wrong,
Yeah.
the arguments people have, and what they'll do when they disagree about tipping.
Right.
But how can couples actually deal with these differences in a good way?
That's the question.
Because nobody wants to fight about tipping every time they go out to dinner, right?
No, of course not. And the good news is there are some things couples can do to find some common ground.
Okay, good.
First things first, communication is key.
Yeah, communication is always key.
It's so important to talk about your tipping habits early in the relationship.
Like right away.
Yeah, early on, like why is tipping important to you?
Okay.
What do you expect?
Okay.
And most importantly, really listen to what your partner has to say.
Right.
Try to understand where they're coming from and why they believe what they do about tipping.
So it's like having that money talk everyone says you should have, but specifically about tipping.
Exactly.
I like that it's better to talk about it openly before you're sitting there with the bill and feeling the pressure.
Yeah, much better.
You know?
Have that talk when you're both relaxed and can be open-minded.
Uh-huh.
Be curious about each other's point of view.
Okay.
Maybe one of you worked in the service industry and knows firsthand how much those tips matter.
Right.
Or maybe there are cultural differences that are playing a role.
That's true.
It's about finding a way to understand each other.
I hear you on the communication part, but isn't there a risk of sounding like you're judging them or preaching to them?
That's a really good point.
Like if I'm always correcting my partner's tips, won't they just get annoyed instead of actually understanding?
Yeah, you could.
How do you balance being open and honest with not being negative?
That's such a great question. You're right. It's about finding that balance.
Yeah.
It's not about giving your partner a lecture or making them feel bad.
Right.
It's about explaining your side of things, why tipping matters to you, and letting them share their thoughts and experiences too.
Okay.
Maybe they just don't realize how much servers depend on tips. Or maybe they have a different idea of what good service means.
Right.
The point is to teach and talk, not to make them feel ashamed.
Okay. Yeah.
Not to criticize.
That makes sense. Education and open communication is so important.
Absolutely.
What about those times when, even after you've talked it out, you still disagree about tipping?
Okay.
Like, what if my partner just isn't comfortable leaving a big tip no matter what?
Well, that's where compromise comes in.
Okay.
And maybe a bit of creativity.
Okay.
Remember that story about the woman secretly adding to her ex-husband's tips?
Oh, yeah.
The author actually suggests having extra cash with you for times like that.
Okay.
You can add to the tip without making a big deal out of it.
I like that.
It's a way to stick to your own values and avoid a fight.
It's like a sneaky little kindness for the server in your relationship.
Exactly. Everyone wins. And
Yeah.
remember, education can really help bridge that gap too. If your partner's unsure about tipping well, maybe share some info about local tipping customs.
Yeah.
Or how much people really make in the service industry.
Right?
Or even tell them stories about how tips have affected people, you know?
That's a good idea.
Sometimes a little bit of knowledge can go a long way in helping them understand and be more empathetic.
You've given some really helpful tips.
I'm glad.
It's all about talking compromising and meeting in the middle.
Yeah, that's the key.
But what about when you share finances?
Good point.
It seems like tipping could become a real problem if you're pooling your money, but disagree on how much to tip.
You're absolutely right. When you're managing money as a couple, it's really important to have clear rules about tipping
Okay.
to prevent arguments later on.
Makes sense.
Maybe you agree on like a minimum percentage you'll always tip.
Okay.
Or you set aside a certain amount each month just for tips.
Right.
The key is to come up with a system that feels fair to both of you.
Yeah. So it's like setting up a little tipping policy for your relationship,
Exactly.
just like you might have a budget for groceries or fun stuff.
Right.
Having those clear boundaries and expectations can really help you avoid conflicts later.
Absolutely, it can. And you know, as we're wrapping up this part of our dive, I want to leave you with this.
Good.
The next time you go out to eat with your partner, watch how they tip.
Really pay attention.
Yeah, really pay attention. What does it tell you about their values?
Uh-huh.
How do those values match up with yours, or are there places where they clash? And most importantly, do those observations give you a chance to have a deeper conversation?
Oh, that's a good point.
A chance to connect on a deeper level and maybe even grow together as a couple.
Wow, that's powerful.
Yeah.
It's like a reminder that these little things we do can say a lot about who we are and what we believe in
They can.
and how we move through the world. It's all
Yeah.
connected.
It truly is. And as we go into our final segment, I think it's important to remember that money
Yeah.
and even something like tipping is often tied up with our emotions.
It's so
It's
sad.
not just about the dollars and cents. It's about our values, our relationships, and how we show who we are to the world.
It's interesting, like, going through all these stories about tipping in relationships.
Yeah.
It really hits you how much emotion we tie to money.
Oh, absolutely. Financial compatibility is so essential for any good relationship.
Yeah.
And tipping, it might seem small,
Uh,
but it can actually be like a mini version of those bigger financial values and habits that couples have.
I see what you're saying. It's like those little differences in tipping amounts.
Right. It can turn into bigger
Yeah.
issues, right?
They can snowball.
Arguments about budgeting, spending habits, even like how we prioritize money as a couple.
Exactly. Imagine a couple where one person is super organized about saving
Yeah.
and the other is more impulsive and likes to spend.
Right.
A simple disagreement about a tip could actually be pointing to those deeper money differences
Yeah.
that they haven't really talked about.
So it's not really about the tip itself.
Right.
It's about what it represents in the grand scheme of their finances as a couple.
Exactly.
It's amazing how these small actions can tell us so much.
It is, and it really highlights why it's so crucial for couples to have those open and honest money conversations early on.
Early on. Yeah.
It's about getting each other's money mindset,
Okay.
setting goals together, and finding ways to align those financial values so you're both on the same page.
Like a financial compatibility checkup.
Exactly.
Just like we talk about important things like religion or politics.
Right.
Talking about money, how we spend, save, and yeah, even tipping.
Can prevent so many problems later.
I couldn't agree more. It's not just about avoiding fights.
Right.
It's also about building trust and respect when it comes to handling money together.
Mm.
When couples are comfortable talking about money openly,
Yeah.
it makes their bond stronger and creates that feeling of shared responsibility.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into tipping in relationships,
Yeah.
I think we can all agree that tipping is way more than just a simple transaction.
It is so much more. It gives you a glimpse into someone's values, their relationships,
Right.
even how financially compatible they are with their partner.
It's amazing how much we can learn just from leaving a tip at a restaurant.
Absolutely. And the next time you're about to leave a tip,
Yeah.
remember you're not just paying for a service.
Uh-huh.
You're expressing a part of yourself
Yeah.
and maybe revealing more about your relationship than you think.
That's a great takeaway for our listeners. Thanks for joining us on this insightful journey into the world of tipping in relationships.
It was my pleasure.
We hope this has given you some food for thought and maybe even a few tips for navigating those sometimes awkward tipping conversations with your loved ones.
Yes, good tips.
Until next time, happy tipping.